Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into the story of modern India's awakening. We're going to look at how a nation, through incredible struggle, finally found its voice. So, how does a nation find its voice? Well, for India, the journey to independence, it didn't actually start with protests in the streets. No, before any of that, there was a much deeper, internal struggle. You could call it a battle for the very soul of the nation itself. And this is where our story really kicks off. It's fascinating, right? It doesn't begin with shouting matches against the British. It starts with Indians looking in the mirror, confronting some really tough challenges in their own society, and planting the first seeds of what would become this monumental change. Okay, so picture this. It's the 19th century, and there's this incredible wave of introspection sweeping across India. You've got thinkers and leaders starting to ask some really hard questions. They began to challenge these deep-rooted social issues. We're talking about things like the sati system, where widows were tragically forced onto their husband's funeral pyre, child marriage, and that rigid, unyielding caste discrimination. Out of all this thinking and debating, two main paths started to emerge. The first one, that was the path of the reformists. These were the folks who believed that for India to move forward, it absolutely had to modernize. They wanted to rationalize traditions, get rid of these harmful practices, and build a much more just society. Then you had the second path, taken by the revivalists. Now for them, the solution wasn't to look to the West for new ideas. No, it was to look back. Their whole idea was to revive what they saw as the pure, original ancient Indian traditions. They truly believed that the answers to modern problems were right there waiting in the past. And this slide, it just perfectly captures the core tension of the time, doesn't it? You have one group pushing to reform society, to change it, and another trying to revive its past glories. This fundamental difference, looking forward versus looking back, it created two totally distinct streams of thought. And these two streams would go on to shape the entire future of the subcontinent. And let me tell you, the work of these reformers had a massive impact. Through the tireless efforts of incredible figures like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, the horrific practice of sati was abolished in 1829. Then you have Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, who championed the cause of widows, which led to the Widow Remarriage Act. And of course, leaders like B.R. Ambedkar and Jyotirao Phule began that long, tough struggle against caste exploitation. You gotta understand, these weren't just small legal tweaks. They were absolutely radical steps toward forging a brand new Indian identity, one based on equality and justice for all. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that before any political freedom could even be on the table, a social awakening had to happen first. It was the crucial first step. And with those seeds of reform now planted, it was time for the next big move, creating a unified political platform. It was time for a first national voice. And here we go, 1885. It's kind of amazing when you think about it. A retired British civil servant, A.O. Hume, actually helps form the Indian National Congress. This was a total game changer. It was the very first time an all-India organization was created with one specific goal, to clearly and formally present Indian political demands to the British government. Now, the early Congress was led by some real intellectual giants, like Dadabhai Naoroji, who was known as the Grand Old Man of India. He's the one who gave the movement its powerful economic critique of colonialism, with his famous drain theory. And this was such a crucial idea. He basically argued that Britain was systematically draining wealth out of India, through exploitative policies and taxes. This was huge, because it turned a struggle for abstract rights into a very real fight against economic injustice. Okay, so up to this point, the movement was mostly about petitions, debates, intellectual arguments, pretty polite stuff. But all of that was about to change, and fast. The catalyst for this dramatic shift, the thing that would push everything towards mass protest, was one single, absolutely explosive event that would literally divide a nation: the partition of Bengal. Let's set the scene. The year is 1905. The Viceroy of India is Lord Curzon, a guy known for being a pretty rigid, old-school imperialist. And he makes this stunning announcement. He's going to partition Bengal. Now, publicly, the British tried to sell this as a simple matter of administrative convenience. Their story was that the province was just too big to govern effectively. But the real goal? Oh,
That was crystal clear to every single Indian nationalist. It was a classic case of divide and rule, plain and simple. The real plan was to separate the largely Muslim eastern areas from the largely Hindu western areas. Why? To split the population and crush Bengal, which at the time was the vibrant nerve center of the entire nationalist movement. The reaction was just immediate. It was powerful, and it was nationwide. The Swadeshi movement absolutely erupted. Swadeshi, by the way, just means of one's own country, and it became this incredible rallying cry. People started boycotting British goods, they promoted Indian-made products, they even started their own national schools. And in this really beautiful act of solidarity, Hindus and Muslims tied rocky bracelets on each other's wrists, basically sending a message, you cannot divide us. But all this new energy, well, it also caused a huge fracture inside the Indian National Congress. The 1907 Surat session saw this really dramatic split. On one side, you had the moderates, leaders like Gokhale, who still believed in doing things by the book, petitions, constitutional methods. But on the other side, you had the extremists like Tilak, who were fired up by the Swadeshi movement and were demanding much more direct action, like boycotts and getting the masses out on the streets. And right in the middle of all this turmoil, something else really significant happened. In late 1905, the All India Muslim League was founded. Now, it was initially formed to protect the political rights and interests of Muslims, but its emergence was a truly pivotal moment. It introduced a whole new and, frankly, very complex dynamic into the freedom struggle, one that would have really long-lasting consequences. So let's take stock. The movement is now radicalized, the political landscape is fractured. It's no surprise that the struggle for freedom started to really escalate. We begin to see new, much more aggressive paths to freedom emerging, not just inside India, but outside of it too. The early 20th century was just buzzing with activity. In 1907, you have Madame Kama defiantly hoisting an early version of the Indian flag on foreign soil, in Germany of all places. Then, in 1913, you've got Indian revolutionaries all the way in San Francisco forming the Ghadar Party, which was dedicated to armed rebellion. But at the same time, there were also moves toward unity. By 1916, at the Lucknow session, the moderates and the extremists finally reunited. They realized they were simply stronger together. All right, now we're entering the final decades of the struggle, and this is where we see a major escalation. The era of polite petitions, that was long gone. A whole new generation of leaders was on the scene, and they were demanding just one thing: Purna Swaraj, or complete independence, nothing less. This was it, the final push. And maybe no one embodied this new, defiant spirit more than Subhash Chandra Bose. I mean, his electrifying slogan, "Give me blood and I shall give you freedom," it just captured the imagination of the entire youth. He truly believed that freedom wasn't something you ask for, it was something you had to seize by force. And he put his money where his mouth was, eventually forming the Indian National Army, the INA, to actually fight the British militarily during World War II. Meanwhile, back in India, Mahatma Gandhi sensed the moment was right for something decisive. He launched the ultimate mass struggle, the Quit India movement of 1942. And his call to the nation? It was so simple and so stark: do or die. There was no ambiguity here. This was a nationwide civil disobedience movement, a final, definitive call for the British to pack their bags and leave India immediately and for good. You see, the pressure from the Quit India movement, combined with the massive strain of World War II, had pretty much fatally weakened the British Empire. So the endgame came, and it came swiftly. There was a last-ditch attempt to keep India united, the Cabinet Mission Plan of 1946, but it failed to find a compromise. So then, in 1947, the last viceroy, Lord Mountbatten, announced his plan. And it was a bombshell. Independence would be granted, yes, but it would come with the partition of the country. And so, on August 15th, 1947, after a long struggle, India's freedom was finally won. So, freedom was won. But at what cost? That's the question we're left with, isn't it? This incredible victory was shadowed by the immense, heartbreaking tragedy of partition. It created two nations, India and Pakistan, but it also unleashed one of the largest and most violent migrations in all of human history. The scars from that division, they continue to shape the subcontinent to this very day. It leaves us with a story of a nation's awakening, for sure, but also with a profound lesson in the painful, messy complexities of what it takes to build a nation.